Many of you have asked for it, and here is the video we promised you. How many times have you heard someone say, "In that country, you can live with very little," or "There, salaries are sky high"? But what is the truth when you put everything together? Salary, cost of living, and, above all, rent. Today, we put an end to the doubts. We will guide you through a complete ranking of all European countries, from the worst to the best, to really understand where, at the end of the month, you are left with more money in your pocket. But beware! To make the comparison as realistic as possible, in this video we will consider the cost of living for a person living alone in a one-bedroom apartment outside the city centre. But if you want to know what the situation is like for families, write family in the comments and we will make a video for you. Welcome to Amazing Europe. Number 46. Armenia. If we consider not only European countries but also transcontinental ones, Armenia is at the bottom of our ranking. Here, the economic situation is a real paradox. The outbreak of the war in Ukraine pushed tens of thousands of Russians, often wealthy, to move to the country, injecting capital and boosting GDP. However, this influx had a devastating side effect for locals. Rental prices skyrocketed, and so did the cost of living. With an average salary of only €518, an Armenian citizen faces a cost of living of almost €700, plus nearly €400 in rent. It is unsustainable mathematics, forcing people to spend more than twice what they earn on basic needs, making saving nothing more than a mirage. Number 45. Ukraine. In a country devastated by war, economic figures become the cold account of a human tragedy. The war wiped out almost 5 million jobs, with a third of businesses gone, and an economy that, despite a fragile recovery thanks to international aid, lives in a state of permanent uncertainty. For a Ukrainian citizen, daily survival is a struggle. The average salary has dropped to just €316, an amount that must cover a cost of living of over €416 and rent of around €216. In practice, the salary barely covers half of essential expenses. It is a dramatic situation that goes beyond statistics, telling the story of the desperate resilience of a people. Number 44. Azerbaijan. Towards the bottom of the ranking, we find another transcontinental nation. Azerbaijan is often called the Land of Fire for its vast oil and gas reserves. And here lies the heart of the problem. The entire economy depends almost entirely on hydrocarbons, which account for 90% of exports and finance the state. But this wealth does not translate into well-being for the majority of the population. The average salary stops at only €395, an amount completely insufficient to cover a cost of living of €484 and rent exceeding €210. In short, the income of an average worker barely covers half of the expenses. It is the portrait of a two-speed economy where underground wealth fails to guarantee a decent life for its citizens. Number 43. Georgia. Another transcontinental nation, Georgia, whose economy has been shaken by the consequences of the conflict in Ukraine. As in neighbouring Armenia, tens of thousands of Russians have moved here, bringing capital but triggering an inflationary spiral, especially in the housing market. Thus, while the average salary stands at €472, rent alone requires over €320, to which is added a cost of living of more than €500. For Georgians, whose income has not grown at the same pace, the result is a drastic drop in purchasing power. A nation paying the price for larger geopolitical dynamics, with its economic stability put to a severe test. Number 42. Moldova. There is one figure that, by itself, tells the economic story of Moldova. Remittances from emigrants, that is, the money sent home by those working abroad, account for almost 15% of the country's entire gross domestic product. This is the key to understanding how it is possible to survive in a nation where the average salary of €594 is not enough to cover a cost of living of €556 and rent of over €385. The math does not lie. Local wages are not enough. Considered one of the poorest nations in Europe, Moldova lives through a silent tragedy. To keep going, it is forced to watch its workforce leave, whose labour abroad becomes the only real safety net for the families left behind. Number 41. Kazakhstan. We now move to the 9th largest country in the world, a transcontinental giant, Kazakhstan. On paper, it is the most powerful economy in Central Asia, boasting vast reserves of oil, gas, and uranium. This colossal image, however, clashes with the harsh daily reality of its citizens. The average salary of €457 barely covers the cost of living of €454, excluding rent, which alone requires another €250. It is a glaring disparity between national wealth and actual purchasing power, a social tension that exploded in the violent protests of 2022. A country that shows how natural resources do not automatically translate into prosperity for ordinary people. Number 40. Albania. Albania is on everyone's lips, the new star of European tourism praised for its beaches and seemingly low costs. But for those who live and work there, the story is very different. The average salary of €679 is almost entirely absorbed by the cost of living alone, which amounts to €644, leaving almost nothing in the pocket. On top of this comes the nearly insurmountable obstacle of rent, which requires another €357. It is precisely the tourism boom that has triggered strong real estate speculation, sending prices soaring. The result is a country increasingly attractive to foreigners, but one that paradoxically makes life difficult for its own citizens. Number 39. Kosovo. We now enter Kosovo, the youngest nation in Europe, with an average age of just 30 years, a republic whose independence is still not unanimously recognized. This incredible demographic energy, however, clashes with a very harsh economic reality, marked by one of the highest youth unemployment rates in the continent. The average salary of €552 must be enough to cover a cost of living of €433 and rent of €215. For many, the only lifeline is the remittances sent by relatives working abroad. It is the portrait of a country full of potential, but where the future for too many young people is still to be built, often far from home. Number 38. Belarus. We move to Belarus, the last true experiment of a planned economy in Europe, where the state still controls the vast majority of enterprises, in a model inherited from the Soviet Union. This strong state presence is directly reflected in people's pockets. The average salary stands at €603, an amount that clashes with a total of essential expenses, between cost of living and rent, of about €654. The economy, kept alive by subsidies and low-cost energy from Russia, guarantees a facade of stability but prevents any real growth in wages. The result is a calculated survival, an almost perfect break-even that leaves citizens in limbo, without collapsing but without ever being able to take off. Number 37. Croatia. We now come to a figure that might surprise many. Here is the first European Union country in this ranking, Croatia. With an average salary of €1,150, Croatian citizens face a cost of living of €754 plus an average rent of almost €500. The country's huge tourism success has caused housing prices to skyrocket, especially along the coast. The recent adoption of the euro has worsened the situation, as many took advantage of it to raise product prices without any real prior control by the state. This dynamic has heavily eroded the purchasing power of local wages. The result is a painful paradox, a paradise for tourists that becomes a daily economic challenge for those who live there all year round. Number 36. Serbia. Serbia is a country that attracts capital. In recent years, it has received 60% of all foreign direct investment destined for the Western Balkans, with the unemployment rate dropping to an all-time low. But this positive image clashes with the daily reality of those who work there. The average salary of €933 is almost entirely swallowed up by a cost of living of €639 and rent exceeding €360. In practice, income is not enough to cover expenses. It is the emblem of an economy that grows thanks to low-cost labour, attracting foreign companies, but without managing to redistribute that growth in the form of real well-being for its citizens. Number 35. Montenegro. The entire economy of Montenegro rests on a single, fragile pillar: tourism, which alone accounts for almost a quarter of the gross domestic product. This dependence creates strong pressure on prices. An average salary of €1,012, among the highest in the Balkans, looks good on paper. However, it is almost entirely cancelled out by a cost of living of €628 and rent exceeding €435, inflated by tourist demand and immigration. For Montenegrins, this means living in a precarious balance, with an income that barely covers expenses, in a country that seems to work more for visitors than for its residents. Number 34. Slovakia. Slovakia holds an almost unbelievable world record. It is the largest car producer per capita on the planet. Yet, it is the second European Union country in our ranking where the numbers simply do not add up. The average salary of about €1,172 clashes with total expenses of over €1,220, combining a cost of living of €745 and rent of nearly €480. Despite its immense industrial strength, wages are still not aligned with the cost of living in the Eurozone. It is the paradox of a productive giant, a true engine for the European industry, whose workers nonetheless struggle to keep up with everyday expenses. Number 33. North Macedonia. North Macedonia has officially been a candidate country for entry into the European Union since as far back as 2005, but its path is still uphill. This perpetual waiting is reflected in an economy that cannot take off. The average salary of €738 is almost perfectly aligned with essential expenses, which amount to about €764 when adding the cost of living and rent. For the population, the result is an almost perfect break-even, leaving no margin at all. The economy still depends heavily on remittances from emigrants, a sign of a domestic labour market that lacks dynamism. It is the portrait of a nation in a geopolitical waiting room, with an economy still waiting for a turning point that has yet to arrive. Number 32. Turkey. Living in Turkey, a transcontinental nation with a millennia-old history, today means fighting every day against an invisible enemy: hyperinflation. On paper, the numbers seem almost balanced. An average salary of €953 against total expenses, between cost of living and rent, of about €977. But this is only a still frame. The reality is that prices are rising at breakneck speed, eroding purchasing power almost in real time. Even when wages are adjusted, inflation runs faster. For Turkish citizens, life has become an endless race to try to keep pace with an unstable economy, where the value of one's work shrinks by the day. Number 31. Bulgaria. We now enter the member state that, according to GDP per capita data, is considered the poorest in the European Union, Bulgaria. Here, the economic reality for citizens is a break-even that leaves no breathing room. The average salary of €923 is barely enough to cover a cost of living of €613 and rent of €321, leaving virtually zero margin for emergencies or savings. This wage stagnation has fueled one of the most severe demographic crises in the world, with mass emigration draining the country of its talent. It is the portrait of a nation trapped in a vicious cycle. Low wages push people to leave, and their departure makes growth even harder to achieve. Number 30. Russia. We now move to Russia, an immense transcontinental nation whose economy has been completely refocused on a single goal: the war effort. This transition has created an apparent internal stability where the numbers align in an almost perfect balance. The average salary of €888 is nearly identical to the combined cost of living and rent, which amounts to €894. But this is not a sign of economic health. It is the result of massive state spending that, on the one hand, supports wages, but on the other, fuels inflation. The outcome is a forced stagnation where the entire nation is mobilized for conflict, leaving citizens with the bare minimum to get by. Number 29. Portugal. We now arrive in Portugal, the country that marks the exact break-even point, where the illusion of growth collides with harsh reality. In recent years, average wages have risen significantly, reaching €1,412. But this is a Pyrrhic victory. The increase has been entirely swallowed up by a frantic surge in prices, especially in the housing sector. An average rent of €730, combined with a cost of living of €685, drains the entire salary. The tourism boom and strong foreign demand have made cities unaffordable for the Portuguese, many of whom are forced to emigrate. Portugal is a nation that, while appearing wealthier, leaves its citizens with €0 in their pockets at the end of the month. Number 28. Bosnia and Herzegovina. For the first time, we cross the break-even threshold and enter Bosnia and Herzegovina. Here, for the first time, the numbers start to show a slight breath of relief. The average salary of €809 finally manages to surpass the sum of the cost of living, €578, and rent, €211. But this small surplus margin hides one of Europe's most serious social wounds: extremely high youth unemployment. The country's complex and fragmented political structure hampers investment and growth, leaving few prospects for the younger generations. It is the portrait of a nation where one might be able to survive, but where building a future is such a daunting challenge that far too many are driven to seek their fortune elsewhere. Number 27. Czech Republic. The Czech Republic boasts a record that half of Europe envies, one of the lowest unemployment rates on the entire continent. But this near certainty of having a job clashes with the reality of the monthly budget. The average salary of €1,441 is only slightly higher than the total of essential expenses, which, between cost of living and rent, reaches almost €1,360. It is the paradox of a strong and industrialised economy, whose success has nonetheless inflated costs, especially in the cities. An EU member state where finding work is relatively easy, but where economic well-being remains a daily achievement for many. Number 26. Slovenia. We now enter Slovenia, an EU member often described as the Switzerland of the Balkans, a green gem celebrated for its stability and high quality of life. It is the classic example of a post-communist success story. The average salary of almost €1,490 manages to surpass total expenses, leaving a small margin. However, this surplus is being eroded by a growing problem: housing costs. Economic success and strong demand have made the real estate market explode, with rents exceeding €574 and a cost of living of €810. It is the paradox of a country that offers enviable well-being, but where this well-being comes at an ever-increasing price, starting with housing. Number 25. Latvia. We continue our journey in Latvia, one of the 3 Baltic republics. Here, the numbers tell a story of great geopolitical sacrifice. The average salary of €1,212 does manage to surpass total expenses, but the composition of these expenses is unusual. Rent is relatively low, around €300, but the cost of daily living has soared to over €811. The reason? The drastic and necessary break from cheap Russian energy. This choice has sent the prices of goods and services skyrocketing, leaving citizens with only a small margin at the end of the month. It is the price a nation pays for its security and independence, a cost visible on every receipt. Number 24. Hungary. We now enter Hungary, an EU member that has chosen to keep its currency, the forint, and an economic policy often at odds with Brussels. After experiencing some of the highest inflation peaks in Europe, the country seems to have partially tamed the surge in prices. The average salary of €1,157 provides a small savings margin, surpassing the total of €1,040 for cost of living and rent. However, this stability is fragile, and purchasing power remains one of the main concerns for citizens in an economy seeking balance between internal pressures and the complex regional geopolitical dynamics. Number 23. Lithuania. Lithuania is often celebrated as one of Europe's most dynamic technology and fintech hubs, a Baltic tiger racing quickly toward the future. But this acceleration has a cost that is visible in the monthly budget. The average salary of €1,326 manages to surpass total expenses, but the margin is small. Citizens face a cost of living of almost €760 and rent approaching €420. Rapid growth has driven wages up, but prices as well, in an economy that feels the pressure of inflation. It is the portrait of a country in full boom, where modernity is achieved but paid for. Number 22. Poland. Poland is the protagonist of one of the greatest European economic miracles of the last 30 years. A country that, running at an impressive pace, has seen wages grow to an average of over €1,400, But this race comes with a price, and it is steep. The economic boom has triggered a severe housing crisis, with prices that have exploded. Adding a cost of living of €700 to rent that is close to €550. The savings margin narrows drastically. It is the paradox of a nation producing wealth at a dizzying rate, yet forcing its citizens into an ever harder struggle to afford a roof over their heads. Number 21. Romania. Since joining the European Union, Romania has seen millions of its citizens leave, one of the largest diasporas on the continent. Yet, looking at the numbers, the situation does not seem desperate. The average salary of €1,055, though among the lowest in the bloc, covers the cost of living of €604 and rent of €313, leaving a small margin. So why leave? Here lies the crucial dilemma. The comparison is not with local costs, but with the much higher wages of the rest of the European Union. It is the tragedy of a country that offers survival, but not enough to keep its talents from leaving in search of far greater well-being only a few hours' flight away. Number 20. Estonia. We now move to Estonia, the most digitalized society in the world, a country where bureaucracy hardly exists. This futuristic image, however, comes with a very tangible cost for its residents. The average salary of €1,585 must contend with one of the highest costs of living in the Baltic region, almost €900, plus rent of €440. The great success of its model, which has turned the nation into a magnet for talent and startups, has inevitably pushed prices upward. It is the portrait of a technological vanguard where innovation is literally paid for every day. Number 19. Malta. We now arrive in Malta, a microstate in the heart of the Mediterranean that we include in the main ranking as a full member of the European Union. Here, the numbers hide a surprising truth. The average salary of €1,905 may seem comfortable, but it clashes with an unusual expense: rent. At €814, the cost of a roof exceeds that of all other living expenses combined, €774. The reason? The island is small and overcrowded, but above all, it has become a hub for finance and iGaming, attracting thousands of well-paid foreign workers who have sent housing demand and prices soaring. The result is a vibrant economy where the cost of physical space eats up much of the earned prosperity. Number 18. Cyprus. We leave Europe, at least geographically, to land in Cyprus, an island that is a member of the European Union, culturally European, but located entirely in Asia. Its economic situation closely resembles that of Malta. Here too, the island has become a magnet for capital and foreign workers, which has put enormous pressure on the housing market. The average salary of €2,019 must contend with rent of €740. But unlike Malta, where housing costs exceeded all other expenses, here the overall cost of living is also very high, almost €885. It is the portrait of an economy that grows and attracts, but where the cost of that very growth weighs heavily on the shoulders of residents. Number 17. Greece. For a decade, it was the symbol of the debt crisis, a country that nearly brought down the entire Eurozone. Today, Greece is experiencing a surprising recovery. Wages have started to rise again, with an average of €1,559, finally allowing for a small margin over expenses. But the recovery carries a hidden cost. While the average rent remains relatively low at €382, it is the cost of daily living that has surged, reaching almost €800. The boom in tourism and inflation have made goods and services much more expensive, eating into part of the salary gains. It is a nation that has pulled itself back from the brink, but is now fighting a new battle, that of prices. Number 16. United Kingdom. We leave the European Union to arrive in the United Kingdom, a country that perfectly illustrates the cost of living crisis. Here there is an almost unbelievable figure: rent costs as much as everything else combined. An average salary of €2,778 must cover nearly €980 for rent and, in addition, another €978 for daily necessities. This symmetry is the result of a decade-long housing crisis and the energy crisis. Even with seemingly high wages, the savings margin is constantly eroded by some of the highest basic expenses in Europe. And we take this opportunity to ask our UK-based readers, has your economic situation worsened or improved since Brexit? Number 15. Italy. For almost 30 years, Italy was the only OECD country where real wages declined. Today, there is finally a slight recovery, with an average salary rising to €2,066. This figure covers a cost of living of €881 and rent of €568, leaving a fairly significant savings margin. But this is a statistical illusion. It hides the deep divide between the north, where these costs are often exceeded and salaries sometimes fall short, and the south, where the cost of living is lower, but so are wages. It is the portrait of a country whose national average seems reassuring, but whose economic reality changes radically from one city to another. Number 14. Spain. If Italy suffered from stagnant wages, Spain fought for decades against another enemy: unemployment, especially youth unemployment, which remains among the highest in Europe. For those who have a job, however, the situation has improved. The average salary has risen to €2,047, a figure that allows for a good margin over expenses. But here too, as in other Mediterranean countries, the tourism boom and the attractiveness of cities have created an anomaly. The cost of rent, almost €700, now matches that of all other living expenses combined. We can say that Spain has a two-sided economy. On one side, a still fragile labour market. On the other, a cost of living that makes it difficult to capitalise on wage gains. Number 13. Iceland. We now move to a unique place in the world, a remote island forged by fire and ice, Iceland. Here, the numbers become extreme in every sense. The average salary is one of the highest anywhere, almost €4,800. But living here carries an equally monumental cost. Rent alone exceeds €1,700, and daily living expenses require another €1,300. The reason is simple. Almost every consumer good must be imported, paying the price of geographic isolation. Yet, despite these staggering figures, wages are so high that they guarantee one of the widest savings margins in Europe. It is the paradox of a very expensive country where life is nevertheless good. Number 12. Ireland. We now arrive in Ireland, the Celtic tiger of Europe, a country that has built its immense wealth by becoming the European headquarters for tech and pharmaceutical giants. This model has pushed salaries to stellar levels, with an average of €3,850. But this wealth comes at a very high price, an unprecedented housing crisis. Rent alone eats up almost €1,400, to which nearly €1,000 in living costs must be added. It is the result of an economy running at two speeds. On one hand, very high salaries generated by multinationals. On the other, an inaccessible housing market that represents the biggest challenge for anyone living on the island. Number 11. Luxembourg. Many of you may be surprised not to see Luxembourg ranked higher on this list, but we need to be careful about one thing. It is extremely difficult to place Luxembourg in this ranking. In fact, almost half of the country's workforce does not reside there, but are cross-border commuters. These workers have, on average, lower salaries than residents, who often work in the wealthiest sectors and in public administration. If we considered only residents, then the average salary would be higher, and consequently, this small country would rank much higher. We will see this same dynamic, even more pronounced, in some microstates later in the video. In any case, these are the official figures for Luxembourg, which should be taken, as we said, with caution. Number 10. France. Perhaps for some of you it might seem strange to see France ranked higher than Luxembourg, but let us explain. First of all, let us remind you that Luxembourg's position in this ranking is somewhat distorted for the reasons we mentioned earlier. And then, France is a country that offers a good economic balance, but only on paper. The reality is far more complex. The average salary of nearly €2,700 allows people to face a cost of living of €947 and rent of €600, ensuring one of the highest savings margins in Europe. But this is a national average that hides a deep divide, the one between Paris and the rest of the country. In the capital and its region, where rents are double or even triple, that salary is barely enough to survive. In provincial cities, on the other hand, It would guarantee a comfortable life. In France, two economic nations coexist under the same flag, a reality that statistics alone can never fully reveal. Number 9. Belgium. Belgium is famous for having one of the highest tax burdens in the world, yet its citizens enjoy remarkable purchasing power. The average net salary, meaning after taxes, exceeds €3,000, a figure that easily covers a cost of living of €951 and rent of €744. The secret behind this apparent paradox is Brussels. As the administrative heart of the European Union and the seat of NATO, the city attracts institutions and multinationals that offer very high salaries, boosting the national average. It is the portrait of an economy where taxes are extremely heavy, but whose geopolitical role guarantees widespread prosperity, creating a unique economic ecosystem. Number 8. Netherlands. We now enter a country living through an almost surreal paradox: the Netherlands, a very wealthy nation suffering from one of the worst housing crises in Europe. The average salary is stellar, almost at €4,000, but the costs are equally impressive. The cost of living exceeds €1,000, and rent alone demands more than €1,100. So how does it manage to rank so high? The secret lies in its hyper-productive economy, an engine that generates salaries so high they can outpace an exorbitant cost of living. It is a country where you are paid a great deal, but where a huge portion of that salary vanishes into the cost of a roof over your head. Number 7. Denmark. We moved to Denmark, one of the countries with the highest taxation in the world. And yet, life here is incredibly good. How is that possible? The secret lies in their famous economic model. The average net salary, meaning the amount left after taxes, is as much as €3,659. This figure makes it easy to handle one of the highest costs of living in Europe, almost €1,100 plus rent of over €800. It is a system based on extremely high productivity and high wages, where taxes fund efficient services that, in turn, sustain the quality of life. A virtuous circle that leaves citizens with exceptional purchasing power. Number 6. Sweden. We arrive in Sweden, the cradle of the famous Swedish model, a system that for decades has sought to combine capitalism with social well-being. And the results are clear. The average net salary of €3,012 allows people to live comfortably, covering a cost of living of €948 and a relatively modest rent of €620. This exceptional purchasing power is the result of a unique social pact, high taxes in exchange for top-tier public services and a dynamic labour market. It is proof that a strong social safety net, instead of holding back the economy, can support a very high quality of life for its citizens. Number 5. Austria. Austria, and in particular its capital Vienna, has dominated global rankings for the best quality of life for years, and our figures perfectly explain why. Despite being one of the most expensive countries, with a cost of living of €1,070 and rent of €700, the average salary is so high, almost €3,500, that it leaves a huge margin. The secret is an extremely robust and highly productive economy that generates enormous wealth and distributes it effectively through high wages. It is the portrait of a winning model, where high productivity translates directly into exceptional purchasing power and well-being. Number 4. Finland. Few countries have suffered a double economic blow as devastating as Finland. In just a few years, it witnessed the decline of its historic paper industry and, above all, the collapse of its national giant, Nokia. But instead of falling apart, the country reinvented itself, becoming one of Europe's most vibrant hubs for technology, video games, and innovative startups. This transition created a new generation of highly skilled jobs, pushing the average net salary to over €3,000. This figure now allows the high cost of living to be absorbed without difficulty, demonstrating an extraordinary capacity for resilience. Number 3. Germany. We arrive in the economic engine of Europe, Germany. In recent times, the international press has often called it the sick man, speaking of recession and industrial crisis, and indeed, this is true. Yet, the figures on the daily lives of its citizens show that we are still talking about a nation able to offer the majority of its people a good standard of living. An average net salary of almost €3,300 allows people to easily handle a cost of living of nearly €1,000 and rent of €664. This extraordinary purchasing power is no accident. It is the result of an extremely strong industrial backbone and very high productivity that support wages. Even in economic storms, the foundation of German well-being proves to be incredibly solid. Number 2. Norway. We arrive in Norway, a country outside the European Union, and cross an incredible psychological threshold. For the first time, the average salary is not just higher than expenses, it is exactly double. The net salary of nearly €3,940 easily covers a cost of living of €1,152 and rent of €820. How is this possible? The answer lies in the North Sea. Oil and gas. The enormous wealth generated by hydrocarbons goes into the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, which finances the welfare state and allows the country to sustain very high wages. It is the model of a nation that has turned its geological wealth into widespread and tangible well-being. But before revealing the winner, we must take a necessary detour and answer a question. What happened to the microstates? If we had included them in the main ranking, it would have completely changed the results. Liechtenstein would have jumped straight to first place overall, San Marino would have ranked 9th, and Andorra 16th. And here comes the first major paradox. Monaco, the global symbol of luxury and wealth, would have ranked only 43rd. How is that possible? The trick is simple. Almost no one who works in Monaco actually lives in Monaco. The rental market is not designed for workers, but for the global elite, seeking a tax residence and willing to pay exorbitant sums. The vast majority of workers are cross-border commuters. They live in France or Italy, with normal rents, and benefit from monegasque salaries. And this model is repeated almost everywhere. The situation in Liechtenstein is a copy and paste case. Half of its workforce lives and pays rent in Switzerland or Austria. A similar story applies to Andorra, where the housing market is inflated by tourism. It is the exact same phenomenon we have already seen on a larger scale with Luxembourg. The only true exception is San Marino. Its economy is so integrated with Italy that costs and wages are aligned. It is the only microstate that is statistically honest for our ranking. And this is exactly why we have excluded them. Their statistics are wonderfully misleading because they compare the salaries of commuters with the rents paid by an elite that often does not even work in that country. So then, excluding Liechtenstein, who takes first place? Before revealing it, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell so you do not miss our new videos. We also remind you about our new channel, America vs. Europe, where we rank all European countries, the United States and Canada, based on various aspects. Number 1. Switzerland. Switzerland is synonymous with wealth. Here, the numbers are on another planet. The average net salary is an almost unreal figure, over €7,100. Of course, the costs are also monumental, almost €1,600 for living expenses and over €1,400 for rent. We are talking about what is probably the highest cost of living in the world. But the Swiss secret is that salaries rise much faster than costs. It is an economic fortress built on ultra-high value sectors such as finance, pharmaceuticals, and luxury goods. The result is purchasing power that crushes the competition, leaving a savings margin unimaginable for the rest of the continent. But how would this ranking look if we considered families rather than people living alone? Well, it would change, and not just a little. If you want to see that ranking, write family in the comments, and we will prepare a video for you. In the meantime, to get a more complete picture of the situation, we suggest you watch this video, where you will discover the 10 European countries with the most severe housing crisis. That is all for this video. See you next time.